Hey guys, welcome back to Previa Alliance. This is Sarah.
And Whitney.
Once again, thanks for being with us. Today, we're going to talk about something that I feel like it's starting to get more news, birth trauma, and maybe even that term. And I think it's coming to age just where women can say, my birth was traumatic, my labor was traumatic. And one thing I've had to learn, and I think you guys all know, I consider both my births with my sons traumatic.
They are. That's an appropriate assessment.
And just from our journey, trauma to you is what it is to you. It's not to be defined by someone else's definition. And that's something I've had to learn. Mm-hmm. But I think what's happening is people have in their heads, it can only be traumatic if X. And I heard that a lot, and I feel like people gaslighted me a lot.
Oh, for sure.
Which we'll talk more about that. But I think we just need to preface this episode that if you have had a traumatic birth or you are in the trenches of it and maybe you've not processed it, talking about this could be a little triggering.
Absolutely. So trigger warning, we are going to talk about birth trauma. And personally, I feel like a birth trauma is anytime a birth does not go how you expected it to go. It could be throughout your labor and delivery experience. It could be a failed epidural. It could be a stat C-section. It could be, that COVID hit and you didn't get to have, how you wanted it to go. It could be that baby went to NICU. It could be that baby got transferred out to Children's Hospital. All of these different things. Anything that you consider to be traumatic is a traumatic delivery. But we do want to throw that trigger warning out there for you mamas. If at any point in time this is too much for you, pause the episode and come back to it when you feel like you're ready.
Yeah. So, with Will, he for a while was the fastest C-section at the hospital we delivered at. That's not a badge of honor.
I was about to say, that's not really the medal you want.
So, and I knew I had a high-risk pregnancy, like I've said before, since the anatomy scan, phase of Previa. And it was, I'll never forget this, went in at 34 weeks. I had to be admitted to the hospital. I was like, I'm not staying. I'm going to be fine. I don't want to do this. I was supposed to be there for a week or 2 weeks.
Gotcha.
And I was fighting it tooth and nail. Mm-hmm. My parents drove down and they were there and they both were like, she's not going to stay. She's going to sign out AMA. Which truthfully, I probably...
Were you close to that?
I was very close because it was like, I was on bed rest and they were just basically going to have to say, stay in this hospital. And I'm like, I think I'm fine.
Yeah.
And very much probably God saying, I know you, Sarah. This is not going to go well.
Yep.
So literally we checked in that afternoon. That next morning, I woke up. It was 5:55. I know this time because it's stuck in my head forever.
Sure.
And I thought I peed on myself.
Water broke.
Blood.
No.
So I started rupturing. And we were told from early on, if I had bled, we had less than 10 minutes to get Will out for me and him to survive. So this was literally told to me just like in the basics of when the doctor told me this and the anatomy scan. It was like, awful. Hey, Whitney, your shirt's really beautiful today.
Oh, cool.
Just change it, okay, if you get something. It was very much just like...
Very routine sounding.
And I'm like, what? 10 minutes?
Which is nothing.
Which is nothing. A normal, to get a stat C-section done in 10 minutes takes, it's
half
just,
an hour,
it's
right?
Crazy. So what had happened is I woke up, Bill was sleeping on the couch very uncomfortably, I will say that. That was a whole event because he did not sleep because you don't sleep in the hospital.
No.
They were checking on me every 2 hours. They were doing stress tests on Will just to make sure.
Yes.
We were literally coasting into this point of the pregnancy. Like I had a good pregnancy minus just like this ticking time bomb.
Wow.
So when this happened, I remember I yelled at him. I was like, it's blood. And he was like, his first reaction was like, no, it's not. And I was like, no, it's blood, Bill.
Yes, it is.
I was like, no, it is. Like. And so he runs out and he starts yelling for help. Well, I don't know if it was full moon. I don't know what was happening. There was 5 other women in distress and babies in distress on the floor.
Stop it.
And
that's terrible.
Joint Commission, which is the huge kind of like
Oh, I hate
It's
Joint
kind of like
Commission
the
so much.
boss of hospitals that come quality checks.
Yeah,
like they get
think like OSHA type thing.
Yes,
but they have to come unannounced to the hospitals to
They
make
were there.
Sure. Oh, good.
So
that's helpful.
So staff was already stressed out. Like, it was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So Bill's yelling in the hallway. I'm hitting the call button, trying to hit the code button because I'm like, we need to get this going.
Mm-hmm.
This woman comes in and she's like, what's going on? And I was just like screaming, code. At that time, I had met this physician the day before. She was a resident. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget her. She scanned me. And she comes around the corner because I was going to be her first patient to round on. And she was, I think this was like maybe her first or second year in training.
Oh, God love her.
And she was just like, oh boy, we're going now.
Uh-huh.
And so then they called a code gray, which is a high volume loss of blood code, so that they automatically get the blood bank blood ready. Okay. And they have the NICU team ready in the OR. So I was completely awake through this, and we're going, I'm screaming, I'm crying. Bill's like trying to get help,
so disoriented. Oh.
I remember him hobbling with one shoe at one point down the hallway after me, and so they start just taking me to the OR.
Yeah.
We got the last OR. I don't know what we would have done. I don't know what you do. I guess they have multiple backup ORs.
I know at St. Vincent's they would have just taken you to the main side of the hospital.
So maybe that's more time, right? To get across.
Oh, for sure. Because at least how St. Vincent's is set up is you have your women and children's building right there. So you've got 2 floors of labor and delivery. Then you've got your walkway to the main hospital. So think ortho, neuro, cardiac, NICU is over there too.
So you got a way to go.
Oh, yeah. And here's the thing. At least on our 3rd floor, which is where that walkway is, there's not an OR on that floor. We would have had to get you to the 4th floor for general surgery.
See, I had to go on an elevator. So we had to go on an elevator. Yeah. Bless this resident's heart. She hit the code button, which she thought it would make us go faster on the elevator down and so you wouldn't stop the floors.
Oh, no.
Which it stops you, right? Because it stops you because the code button's intention there is to stop the elevator so that, people can get to you to do the code.
If I guess interprets that as the code is happening in the elevator. Oh, dear.
And so one of the nurses swipes and fixes that. So we pseudo got stuck in the elevator for a hot second.
Sarah, and this is terrible.
We get down, and I'm just in my head thinking 10 minutes, right? It's like
you have this countdown.
I have a countdown, and in my head, I'm going, this is not well. So we get down there, and they're like, I see the OR door open, and it's just this team of people ready, right? Because I will say this, they were just like ready, like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
And I remember the attending going, I'm your attending. I don't,
Yeah.
eyes, that's all I saw. And they're like, start taking your clothes off. I just start ripping my clothes off, throw myself onto the OR table.
Yeah. So and no anesthesia at this point.
No anesthesia at this point. And they are literally...
I'm freaking out for you right now.
And I'm going, okay, they're just going to... It's just going to be what's going to be. Like, I'm like, are they going to put me under? What's going to happen? And I remember them immediately just putting in a catheter. And I was like, no warning, no nothing, which I understand because it's an emergency situation. And also being a nurse, like, I know sometimes it's like...
Yeah. You get in go mode.
You get in go mode. But to me, I was just like, oh, and then... There's, like, people on either side, like, because they strap you down for a C-section. Yeah. So they're strapping you down. They're cleaning my belly. They're trying to find the heartbeat. And I hear them say, no heartbeat.
Stop it.
And I'm going, check the left side. So I start yelling left side because Will always used to kind of, like, kind of just stay over there. And I didn't hear them hear that it was found. And so the next thing I know, the blue drape's happening. And there was an anesthesiologist. And he was trying to comfort me in that moment. And he was like, I know your husband. He had went to training with Bill. And I was not kind in that moment what I said to him. And basically told him to be quiet and not those words. And to intubate me. Because I had heard ready to cut. And I thought,
I don't want to feel this.
I don't want to feel this. And now... to my lack of knowledge, which I think this should be told if you at all have an option of, like, even in the realm possibility of emergency C-section, which, I mean,
Yeah.
some people you will, like, kind of know. Like, with me,
Yeah.
that should have been explained, right?
Yes.
Like, if you have an emergency C-section, they will not give you anesthesia until right ready because it affects the baby.
Oh, I see. I didn't know that either.
So I, even as a nurse, did not know that.
Are they talking about, like, putting you under anesthesia or your spinal?
So I had no option of spinal. This was general. So they had to just knock me out completely.
Well, okay. Yeah, I see that now because it does cross the placenta.
So, like, they want OB to literally have the knife, like, ready to roll before they so it can just get the baby out.
Got it. So that way the anesthesia doesn't affect the baby.
I didn't know this. And I thought, what is this guy doing? Telling me he knows my husband, which he was pushing the drugs. It just had not reached me yet.
Got it.
But again, it's one of those things I think women should be better prepared.
I agree.
And say, if it's going to be an emergency C-section, if this turns, if this happens, you're going to hear a lot of things.
Yeah, you are.
People may not have, I mean, they're supposed to, and they should say, hey, Sarah, I'm going to do a Foley now. I'm going to do this now. But in you're trying to save my life and my child's life, I give you that grace.
Yeah.
Now, looking back, I'm thankful for that. But it was also very traumatic for me.
Oh, for sure.
And I remember, they of course didn't let Bill back.
No.
But I just saw his face. But, it's like you don't know.
Yeah.
So wake up, and there was this wonderful nurse there. And she had been like, I don't even think she was supposed to be really a recovering nurse. She had trained in it, but she was like, this is like the 6th emergency C-section going on. Like, things are burning down. And she was like, baby's okay, you're okay. That's the first thing she said. And I'm so grateful she said that to me. Because I was waking up and I'm like, what's going on?
That's your first thought too, is where's Will? Am I okay? Like,
is he okay?
On?
Do I have a uterus left? Like, what's going on? And then they're like, we'll get your husband. And so here comes Bill, and he has seen Will, and he shows me a picture of Will.
Okay.
And then post-general anesthesia C-section, you can just, like, shake with the shivers and pain.
And that's pretty common with epidurals, too.
I had that with James, but I didn't, no one told me that. So here I am. My body was just, like, literally shaking.
Yes.
And so they had to end up giving me medicine, switching it.
Yep.
They rolled me to see Will.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's okay.
Yeah.
But he's in the NICU.
Yeah.
And one thing I'm so grateful for is that I delivered at a hospital that I could be at the same place as his NICU. So I could be rolled to him. I have had friends and know of people that the NICU is in a different hospital across town and you're separated. So that's something I always try to say, ask.
Oh, for sure.
Ask if your hospital, if something goes wrong, you have a NICU that you can, because you may not be able to walk for a while after a C-section or a vaginal delivery.
Especially if you get a 4th degree.
So you want to be able to be rolled down there instead of getting in a car. And a lot of times they won't release you, so you don't even have that option.
Exactly.
So that's just a side note that listeners just take note. If you're, it's better to be, it may not be the most bougie, cushious little labor room, but if you can be with your child,
it's worth it.
It's so worth it. So I think in that moment, everybody then began to say, oh, at least you're okay, right? So you're fine. Healthy mommy, healthy baby. You should be very thankful you were where you're at.
And that's what we mean by gaslighting.
And I'm sitting here, and I think this is probably more I read about birth trauma. You're almost in like an alternate universe as soon as it happens.
It's kind of shock.
It's exactly shock. And I was just like, I didn't know up from down.
Yeah.
I don't think my mind had just processed that whole story.
Oh, agreed.
And I wanted to see Will.
Yeah.
And I remember then I just kind of forgot about my experience and put it in the back of my head. And all I was is now I got to get to the NICU. I need to know what's going on. And then they throw a breast pump at you. And they're like, so we're 6 weeks early having a birth. My milk is not responding.
Yep.
And now they know more. Traumatic births delay milk production and can make it harder.
Do you know why, though?
Why?
It is because your body is so focused on surviving and recovering that lactation is not something your body needs to survive. Therefore, it suppresses it.
So it's like my body's like, hey, you about died here.
Yeah. So we're going to put all of our energy, all of our resources into you surviving and recovering sorry, we don't have enough to make milk.
Yeah.
Just like you hear about a lot of women lose their periods when they're in a very like stressful environment or they've been through a trauma.
Yeah.
Their body's like, you know what? You don't really need that right now, so we're just not going to worry about it.
And it, no one said that to me. They just kept saying,
Oh.
eat the oatmeal.
Yeah.
Drink water. Drink the blue Gatorade. How to do, it's like the power pumping.
Oh, yes.
So, and I had one of the hospital grade pumps in the NICU.
Mm-hmm.
And then we ended up renting one to bring home. And I called it Old Bessie because she just lugged everywhere with me.
Yep.
It's a different story for a different day, but talk about trauma with just pumping consistently.
Yes. The sound of it is triggering.
Oh, I thought it was talking to me one night because this is like, wah, 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 wah. I mean, and you're sleep deprived, and I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
So that whole hospital experience, so then I was held for 4 days so I could go to the NICU, and then I got discharged and Will stayed.
Yeah.
But the whole entire time, I then focused on Will, and then I remember people calling and being like, it's hard to describe to them your birth and like truly what trauma you went through. And I even think my parents and Bill, they were so scared from it and just like didn't even know how to process it themselves, especially Bill. I mean, he saw the whole thing.
Yeah.
And he's so helpless standing
That's like
there.
Vicarious trauma for him.
Yeah. He's just standing there. And I appeared fine. I mean, I remember everybody was like, you're handling this great.
Appeared is the key word.
Appeared. And then I don't think it hit me until we got home. Yeah. And then what started happening is I would dream of the birth.
Absolutely.
And literally, I'd go to sleep at night when I could sleep because I started having the postpartum depression, where I was
PTSD.
Where I was fixated on, is Will going to die? If I go to sleep, we were battling that, and then if I did sleep, I literally would relive calling out for help till hearing ready to cut, and I could not break that.
That's hard.
And I'd wake up and I wouldn't know if Will was okay. And I didn't tell anybody this. Yeah. And I was like, why can I not get over this, Sarah?
Can't I shake this?
Because then, again, all I heard was, Will's a miracle. He is a miracle.
Yeah.
You're doing so great. Look at you.
Yeah.
Be thankful you have a baby. That was a big one.
I didn't say I wasn't thankful. I said I'm trying to process my trauma.
It was very much like, and then one person was like, well, so-and-so's delivery was X, and that's a lot worse. And I was like, wait, what? And I felt like I had to justify why I was not coping.
Yeah.
Because no one at all looked at me and said, hey, Sarah, what you went through is super traumatic.
Yeah, no one validated you.
And they just said, like, you need to be okay because Will's okay.
Yeah.
So I guess this kind of brings us to EMDR therapy.
Yes.
Which I went through.
Yeah.
Give them just like a short, what is EMDR?
So EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And with EMDR, it can be done a few different ways. Most of the time, people have headphones on. And there is like a noise playing, and a therapist will guide you through a meditation. And essentially, you kind of go back through your traumatic event. Now, that being said, if you do this, you need to make sure that you find a therapist that is actually certified in this.
Yes.
Because we do not want to re-traumatize you.
Yeah.
Because that can happen.
And I know we've mentioned this before, but how can they make sure they find a certified therapist?
I would go to Psychology Today.
Okay.
Put in whatever area that you're living in. I will say some therapists don't put on there like maternal mental health or postpartum depression, anxiety, what have you. So you may want to look for EMDR and then call that practice and say, hey, do they do women's issues or women's health?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So if you're specifically wanting to work through a traumatic delivery and you want to utilize EMDR, psychologytoday.com, look in your area, look for EMDR first.
Okay.
then either call or email the practice, whatever's easiest for you, and see if that therapist works with women's health.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I will say I had EMDR therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and it was life-changing to me.
Absolutely, it can be.
And
yes.
I remember after, I did not dream about it anymore, and I process it now. And one interesting fact was I was having urinary pain. And my therapist connected that to, remember me mentioning the Foley and the catheter, and felt very intrusive to me. It felt like it just happened to me, and I didn't want it to happen. Now, no consent. In the grand scheme of the whole delivery, where I was cut wide open, people are like, "Why are you fixated on the Foley?" But that was to me.
But you didn't give consent. You didn't have the opportunity to give consent.
And my trauma was held physically, which trauma I learned does that. You can hold your mind, they say, may forget, but your body doesn't.
The body keeps the score.
Yeah. And so that's what happened to me. And after that, I did not have urinary pain.
That's incredible.
So I think what we want our listeners to know is that I lived that with Will, and James was traumatic in its own sense. Different day, different story. We'll tell that. But you don't have to live feeling that what you went through, people are not validating.
Yeah.
Your trauma is your trauma.
Absolutely.
And so what is some helpful tips we can tell them?
Sometimes we have to validate ourselves.
Okay.
Because other people, especially in the South, and I say that, which I know I'm biased, I've only lived in the South, but people in the South are again going to be like, well, you should just be thankful that you and baby are here and you're healthy.
A lot of gaslighting.
A lot of gaslighting happens, and I think people have good intentions with that. Again, kind of think of it like a grief where you're at a funeral and someone says, well, you should just be grateful that they're not in pain anymore. Well, all right, Aunt Brenda, but I still miss my grandmother. I'm allowed to cry about this. That's not a bad thing.
I'm allowed to live my emotions and my experiences.
Absolutely.
And I think it is awkward. I felt like people didn't want to trigger me, so maybe they just brushed over it, or they didn't know what to say to me. So then that made it feel like I was isolated and alone more.
Absolutely.
So I think, looking back, someone saying, Sarah, what you went through, that had to be super scary and horrible. Are you okay? I just want to say, I'm sorry you went through that.
Yeah. Because you're not looking to them to fix it.
No, I never wanted anybody to fix me. I just wanted someone to say, Sarah,
that was horrible.
That was so much.
Yeah. So you can validate yourself. There's nothing wrong with that, because other people may not give that to you.
Yeah.
Let's just be real about that. And then you're allowed to feel your feelings. You can be grateful that you and your baby are here and are okay now.
Yeah.
In the present moment, they are okay now. You are okay now. But you can also grieve that your birth was nothing like how you expected it to go.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing like you would have expected it to go. I would also encourage voice journaling.
Yeah.
Because again, part of what you brought up, Sarah, was you kind of kept dreaming or almost reliving your trauma.
I couldn't break it. I just felt it was Groundhog Day.
Yeah. Over and over and over again. And so I would really encourage voice journaling. It gives you the opportunity to get things out, to process all of that. Now, if you have a spouse who witnessed all of this, they likely have vicarious trauma too.
I know Bill did, and I think he felt like he had to be so strong for me.
Agreed, and that's very common too. And oftentimes they are almost fearful to talk to you about the labor and delivery experience because they don't want to re-traumatize you.
Yeah.
Well, then they're also hanging on to that trauma. You may really want to know, what did you see, because that will help me process this. Let your partner voice journal as well, and just say, you don't have to listen to it again. I'm not going to force that on you. I want to listen to it though.
Yeah.
And take that at your own pace.
Yeah.
Again, you may get 2 minutes into it and be like, whoa, that's a little more than I can handle for the here and now. I'll come back to it.
Yeah.
That's okay.
And I think if I know this, that I had to process this trauma. I tried not to, and it caught up to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true with a lot of people, if not everybody.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
going to catch up to you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, avoidance is a defense mechanism.
It was.
And there are often times where avoidance can be a helpful defense mechanism, because oftentimes when we are in that moment, it is go time.
Yeah.
We really have to deal with what we're dealing with, and we can't process and handle it at the same time.
Yeah.
Our brains truly can't do that. So we avoid it by saying, okay, I'm just going to have to deal with that later. In the moment, that's appropriate. But if we continue to use avoidance as a defense mechanism because we're too scared to process what we're going through, then ultimately it's going to come back to us.
So moms out there, we are first so sorry that if this resonates with you, this is not anything that you have done.
This is not the club you want to belong to.
It's not the club you want to belong to. There is hope. You don't have to be trapped in it.
Agreed.
You can be validated. You can find resources. You can find help. You can process it. Look, like Whitney said, on Psychology Today.
Mm-hmm.
Reach out and just have an honest, conversation with people. I have found other women who have had similar birth trauma experiences to be comforting to me.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that in preference that it's more those who've processed it.
Yeah.
Because I think if you both haven't, it can sometimes, to me, it made it a little worse.
Sometimes we tend to project that onto another person unintentionally.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, it can almost exacerbate each person's trauma. So it's, if you haven't processed your trauma and you start talking to another woman who's been through a traumatic delivery and she says, oh, I've done EMDR, or I've done therapy, or I've done blah, 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 you can feel like that's probably a pretty safe outlet for you.
Yeah, it is.
Now, if they say, oh, this happened 2 weeks ago, might want to pump the brakes a little bit, still be friends so that you don't feel so alone, but kind of have boundaries in place of what you can share and what you want to receive from the other person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, too, if you know of a friend or family member that you hear their birth story, if you say, I'm here for you if you want to talk.
Absolutely.
Or, again, I'm just so sorry this happened to you.
Validate where they're coming from.
And then I will say, if they're pregnant again after a traumatic birth, that can bring up a whole lot of emotions.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what happened with James, is that I did the detachment. We talked about that to protect myself in case it was a traumatic birth. And I think I did not want to relive anything still with Will. And I've told Whitney this. Will's birthday is a trigger to me, even though I feel like I'm healed well from my trauma.
Yeah.
I still have a hard time around his birthday.
Yeah.
And I want to celebrate him.
Mm-hmm.
But I just feel in my body, it was such a thing. It was such a, it was a life or death experience for us. And it's still hard on me. So if that's happening to you moms, that's common.
Extremely.
And it's a part of my life, and I accept it. And Bill's noticed it and said, okay, you have a little bit more anxiety during this week. Yeah. I can tell you get a little more emotional.
Yeah.
So kind of knowing your triggers about it, going back to the hospital that happened we delivered James in the same hospital as Will. And
that's hard.
I will say I should have probably been in therapy before I went to that.
Yeah.
So going back, if that's the case, be aware of that. But you're not alone, moms.
You're not.
And unfortunately, it's more common than not to have your birth experience not go the way you want it to.
Absolutely.
So process that, heal that, and we're always here for you.
We sure are.
Till next time.
All right, bye. Guys.